Betrayal is one of the most deeply human experiences. It cuts through the soul in a way that is almost impossible to describe. When someone you trust, someone you consider family, a friend, or a companion turns against you, it shakes the very foundation of your understanding of the world. We see this in the life of Prophet Yousaf whose story begins with an almost unimaginable act of betrayal, the jealousy of his own brothers. They were his blood, his family, and yet they conspired to harm him, to cast him into a pit, to sell him into slavery, and ultimately to remove him from the warmth of his father's love. Imagine for a moment the emotional and spiritual turmoil that must have stirred in the heart of young Yousaf the sense of injustice, the confusion, the isolation. All these are feelings every human can relate to in some form or another. What makes this story so powerful is not just the betrayal itself, but how Yousaf responds to it. Betrayal is not only an external wound, it becomes an internal struggle. When someone deceives us or turns against us, we are forced to confront difficult questions. Why did this happen? Why to me? What did I do wrong? These questions can lead to despair, resentment, and even a desire for revenge. Psychologically, betrayal can create a fracture in our trust of others, leaving a lingering sense of vulnerability that is difficult to heal. It shakes our perception of the world as a fair place and challenges the most basic assumptions about relationships and loyalty. Yet, in the life of Yousaf we witness something extraordinary. Despite the betrayal, despite being thrown into the pit and sold into a foreign land, he does not lose his faith in Allah. This is a profound lesson. Betrayal, while painful and disorienting, does not have to define us. It can become a turning point if we choose to respond with patience, reflection, and trust in the divine wisdom that governs our lives. The Quran explicitly reminds us of this in the story of Yousaf, describing how, even in his darkest moments, he remained steadfast, trusting that Allah's plan was greater than the cruelty he endured. Philosophically, betrayal also forces us to confront the duality of human nature. Those who betrayed Yousaf acted out of envy, pride, and a limited understanding of their own hearts. Betrayal is often rooted in human weaknesses. Fear, jealousy, insecurity, and recognizing this allows us to develop compassion, even for those who wrong us. Psychologically, understanding the motivations behind betrayal can prevent it from consuming us. Instead of internalizing it as a reflection of our own inadequacy, we can see it as a manifestation of others' limitations. In this way, betrayal becomes less of a personal condemnation and more of an opportunity to cultivate resilience. The emotional weight of betrayal is heavy, but it also creates the space for tremendous growth. For Yousaf, the initial pain planted the seeds of empathy, discernment, and moral strength. Experiencing betrayal in such an intimate and devastating form forced him to look inward, to understand his own heart, and to anchor himself in faith. It is often in the crucible of such suffering that the strongest aspects of character are forged. This is not merely a theoretical observation. It is a practical insight for anyone facing betrayal in their own life. The emotional wound, if approached consciously, can become a source of profound personal transformation. So, when we reflect on the betrayal Yousaf faced, we see more than injustice. We see the beginning of a journey toward resilience, wisdom, and ultimately triumph. Betrayal, as painful as it is, serves a higher purpose when met with patience, understanding, and unwavering faith. It teaches us about the fragility and the beauty of human relationships, about the dangers of envy, and about the inner strength that emerges when we refuse to be defined by the actions of others. In the end, the story of betrayal in Yousaf's life is a mirror for our own struggles. Each of us will, at some point, face someone who deceives us, abandons us, or undermines us. The question is not whether betrayal will happen, but how we respond when it does. Will we allow it to consume us, or will we allow it to shape us, refine us, and strengthen our connection to what truly matters? The story of Yousaf reminds us that betrayal, while deeply painful, can be the first step on the path to triumph. It is a call to rise above the immediate hurt, to hold fast to our principles, and to trust that every trial carries within it the seeds of a greater victory. Faith is not merely a concept we recite in words. It is a force that carries us through the most severe storms of life. In the life of Prophet Yousaf, we see a young man confronted with a sequence of trials that would break most hearts. He was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and taken far from home into a world that was unfamiliar and often hostile. Later, he faced false accusations and imprisonment, circumstances that could easily lead a person into despair or hopelessness. Yet, through it all, Yousaf demonstrates a principle that is essential for every human being: maintaining faith, even when the situation seems unbearable. Maintaining faith amid trials is not about denying the pain or pretending that life is easy. On the contrary, faith acknowledges the full weight of suffering. Yousaf did not live in ignorance of his circumstances. He experienced fear, confusion, and sorrow just as any human would. What distinguishes him is the way he anchors himself in a deeper reality, a trust in Allah's wisdom and justice that transcends immediate circumstances. This is a psychological insight that is incredibly profound. In moments of hardship, the human mind naturally searches for meaning. Without meaning, pain can spiral into despair. Faith provides that meaning. It transforms suffering from a meaningless ordeal into a stage in a larger, divinely guided narrative. Psychologically, maintaining faith strengthens resilience. Yousaf could have allowed his circumstances to define him, to let bitterness, resentment, or hopelessness take root in his heart. But he chose a different path. By keeping his focus on Allah, he cultivated an inner sanctuary, a place of strength that external events could not touch. This is why spiritual grounding is so critical. It functions as an anchor in the turbulent sea of life, preventing us from being tossed to and fro by every wave of adversity. For us, this could mean turning to prayer, reflection, or the pursuit of moral integrity. But the principle is the same. Faith provides stability when everything else feels unstable. Philosophically, maintaining faith amid trials also teaches us humility. It reminds us that no matter how intelligent, capable, or prepared we are not in complete control of the unfolding of events. Yousaf could not dictate the actions of his brothers, he could not prevent his enslavement, and he could not avoid the slander that led to his imprisonment. Yet he understood that these trials were not random or meaningless. They were part of a divine plan that was ultimately just and purposeful. This perspective does not diminish the reality of suffering. Rather, it situates suffering within a broader cosmic framework, allowing the human heart to endure with patience and hope. There is also a practical dimension to maintaining faith. When we anchor ourselves in principles, in moral and spiritual certainty, we are better able to navigate complex challenges. Yousaf did not merely endure his trials passively. His faith gave him clarity of mind and moral direction, allowing him to act wisely and ethically even in situations that seemed hopeless. He could resist temptation, he could remain dignified in the face of false accusations, and he could interpret dreams with insight, all because his faith anchored his character. Faith, therefore, is not passive resignation. It is active engagement with life's trials, guided by a higher understanding. This lesson applies to all of us. Life will inevitably confront us with moments of betrayal, injustice, failure, and misunderstanding. Maintaining faith amid these challenges does not mean we will not feel pain, disappointment, or fear. It means we will not be consumed by them. It means we will hold on to a sense of purpose and direction that transcends the immediate chaos. It allows us to rise each day with courage, to act with integrity, and to trust that our suffering has a place in a larger narrative that ultimately leads to growth and triumph. In reflecting on Yousaf, we realize that faith is not just about what we believe. It is about how we live in the midst of trials. Every hardship is an opportunity to deepen our trust, refine our character, and cultivate resilience. It is a chance to transform pain into a source of spiritual strength. The story of Yousaf reminds us that even when circumstances are beyond our control, our response remains within our power. Our faith, maintained with sincerity and patience, becomes the guiding light that illuminates the path forward. So, when you face your own trials, remember Yousaf. Remember that faith is not a shield that blocks every hardship, but a compass that guides you through it. Hold fast to it, let it anchor your heart, and let it shape the way you respond to life's challenges. For it is in maintaining faith amid trials that true resilience, wisdom, and eventual triumph are born. Patience is often spoken of in general terms, but when we examine it closely, it is one of the most profound forms of strength a human being can cultivate. Patience is not passive waiting. It is an active engagement with life's challenges, a deliberate choice to endure hardship with dignity and composure. In the life of Prophet Yousaf, patience is not just a moral ideal. It is a necessity for survival and a key to eventual triumph. From the moment he was betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and later falsely accused and imprisoned, Yousaf faced circumstances that could easily have broken his spirit, and yet he endured. He did not surrender to despair, nor did he allow bitterness to take root in his heart. The psychological dimension of patience is particularly remarkable. In moments of adversity, the human mind naturally oscillates between hope and despair. Without patience, the suffering becomes unbearable. It is magnified by the mind's tendency to fixate on injustice, on what has been lost, on what is unfair. Patience, however, functions as a stabilizer. It allows the mind to observe circumstances without becoming consumed by them. Yousaf demonstrates this perfectly. Despite being far from home and surrounded by injustice, he retained a sense of inner equilibrium. His patience was not mere endurance. It was an active choice to maintain integrity and faithfulness in a world that seemed determined to challenge him at every turn. Philosophically, patience teaches us to reframe our relationship with time and expectation. Many of us desire immediate resolution, instant relief from hardship, instant justice, instant recognition of our worth. Yousaf, however, shows that life's trials often unfold slowly, and that the passage of time is an essential component of personal growth. His years in the pit, in slavery, and in prison were not wasted. They were formative, shaping his character, refining his insight, and preparing him for responsibilities far greater than he could have imagined at the outset. Patience, in this sense, is not simply waiting. It is an active preparation for the opportunities and responsibilities that will follow. Perseverance is the natural companion to patience. It is one thing to wait calmly. It is another to continue striving, to continue doing what is right, even when the outcome is uncertain. Yousaf demonstrates this through his consistent commitment to moral and ethical principles. Even when confronted with the seduction of power, the temptation of false comfort, or the injustice of imprisonment, he persevered in integrity. He acted not out of immediate reward or fear of consequence, but out of a deep sense of duty and trust in Allah. Psychologically, perseverance is what transforms passive endurance into active resilience. It is the force that converts suffering into experience, weakness into strength, and trials into triumph. There is also a deeply spiritual dimension to patience and perseverance. Yousaf did not merely endure hardship as a human, he endured it with consciousness of the divine. This awareness transforms patience from a coping mechanism into a source of inner peace. When we trust that our struggle is observed, understood, and guided by a higher wisdom, we no longer see ourselves as isolated victims of circumstance. We become participants in a larger narrative, one in which every trial carries a purpose and every hardship contains seeds of growth. Patience and perseverance, therefore, are not only practical tools, they are pathways to spiritual maturity. For us in our own lives, the lesson is clear. Challenges are inevitable, but our response defines the trajectory of our character and our destiny. Patience allows us to endure suffering without losing our essence, and perseverance ensures that we continue to act in alignment with our principles, even when the outcome is uncertain. Together, they form a powerful combination, enabling us to navigate the complexities of life with dignity and purpose. When we look at the life of Yousaf, we realize that his patience was never passive and his perseverance was never mechanical. Both were rooted in faith, moral integrity, and an unwavering commitment to truth. The story reminds us that true triumph is rarely instantaneous. It is the product of sustained effort, thoughtful endurance, and the courage to remain steadfast when the world seems determined to test every fiber of our being. So, as you face your own trials, remember Yousaf remember that patience is not simply waiting for things to change, and perseverance is not simply continuing despite difficulty. They are conscious choices to endure and act rightly, guided by faith and anchored in integrity. In cultivating these qualities, we do not merely survive adversity. We transform it into a pathway toward wisdom, strength, and ultimately, triumph. Adversity is often perceived as a disruption, an obstacle to the life we expect to lead. Yet, when we examine the story of Yousaf, we see that adversity is much more than a challenge. It is a teacher. The experiences that he endured, from betrayal by his brothers to the trials of slavery and imprisonment, were not just tests of patience or faith. They were formative experiences that cultivated wisdom, insight, and strategic thinking. Wisdom in adversity is the ability to perceive beyond the immediate suffering, to recognize the lessons embedded within hardship, and to act in a manner that transforms misfortune into opportunity. Yousaf exemplifies this principle in every stage of his journey. Psychologically, human beings often respond to hardship with confusion, fear, or reactionary behavior. It is natural to focus on what has gone wrong, on what has been taken from us, or on what we wish had never happened. Yousaf, however, demonstrates a different approach. Despite being thrust into a foreign land and sold as a slave, he navigated his circumstances with calm awareness and careful judgment. He assessed the situation, recognized the variables he could control, and acted within those parameters. This is a fundamental principle of wisdom, focusing on what is within our capacity to influence, rather than being consumed by what lies beyond our control. In life, our power is rarely in controlling others or circumstances, but in mastering our own responses and choices. Adversity also cultivates foresight. Yousaf, was able to interpret dreams, not merely as an intellectual exercise, but as a tool to anticipate the future and provide solutions that benefited others. This ability to foresee consequences, to analyze situations deeply, and to apply knowledge for the greater good is a hallmark of wisdom forged in struggle. It reminds us that adversity, while painful, is a catalyst for developing skills and insights that comfort and ease rarely provide. There is a paradox here. Suffering often creates the conditions for profound capability, insight, and discernment. Philosophically, wisdom in adversity requires humility. Yousaf could have approached his trials with arrogance or self-pity, but instead he maintained a perspective rooted in understanding his place within a larger divine plan. He recognized that knowledge, insight, and success are not purely human accomplishments. They are facilitated by guidance, reflection, and alignment with truth. Adversity, then, teaches us humility by reminding us that life is complex, outcomes are uncertain, and our understanding is limited. The wiser we become, the more we recognize how much we do not know, and this humility allows us to approach challenges with clarity rather than impulsivity. Wisdom in adversity is not purely internal. It manifests in actions that are ethical, thoughtful, and considerate of others. Yousaf used the insight gained from his experiences to manage Egypt's resources during the years of famine. His strategy was not motivated by personal gain, but by service, foresight, and justice. This teaches a vital lesson. True wisdom is inseparable from character. It is not enough to know what to do. One must act in alignment with principles, ethics, and compassion. Adversity, therefore, is a testing ground for moral as well as intellectual development. For us today, the lessons of Yousaf are deeply relevant. We all face situations that feel unjust, overwhelming, or incomprehensible. These moments are opportunities to cultivate discernment and practical wisdom. They invite us to slow down, observe carefully, analyze thoughtfully, and respond strategically rather than reactively. Adversity strips away superficiality. It forces us to confront the essence of who we are, to evaluate our choices, and to prioritize what truly matters. Those who emerge from trials with clarity, insight, and ethical strength demonstrate the power of wisdom forged under pressure. In essence, Yousaf teaches us that adversity is not merely something to endure. It is something to learn from, to engage with actively, and to transform into a vehicle for personal and communal growth. Wisdom in adversity is the ability to see beyond immediate discomfort, to integrate lessons into long-term action, and to maintain integrity while navigating the unpredictable landscape of life. It is both a shield and a tool, a shield against despair and a tool to create solutions, build understanding, and positively influence the world. So, when life places obstacles in your path, remember Yousaf recognize that within every challenge lies the opportunity to develop foresight, cultivate humility, and act with insight. Do not let adversity simply pass you by or crush your spirit. Instead, let it refine your mind, deepen your character, and expand your understanding. True wisdom, as Yousaf demonstrates, is born not in ease, but in the crucible of difficulty. And it is precisely this wisdom that transforms trials into triumph. Forgiveness is perhaps one of the most profound and transformative responses to injustice, yet it is also one of the most challenging. The story of Yousaf presents an extraordinary example of this principle in action. After being betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and wrongfully imprisoned, he eventually attained a position of influence and authority in Egypt. At this moment, he was in a position to exact revenge, to punish those who had caused him immense pain. Yet Yousaf chose a path that is far more powerful than retribution. He forgave. This decision is not only morally remarkable, it is psychologically liberating and spiritually elevating, offering lessons that resonate for every human being. The first thing to understand is that forgiveness is not a denial of pain. Yousaf did not act as if the suffering he endured was inconsequential. He remembered the betrayal, the injustice, and the loneliness he experienced. What he rejected, however, was the desire to let those experiences define him or to allow resentment to dictate his actions. Psychologically, holding on to anger and a desire for revenge has a corrosive effect. It binds us to the past, to the pain inflicted by others, and prevents us from moving forward. Forgiveness, in contrast, is an active choice to release that hold and reclaim one's own emotional and moral agency. Yousaf demonstrates that forgiveness is not weakness, it is an assertion of strength. Forgiveness also requires perspective. Yousaf understood that his trials, as painful as they were, served a greater purpose within the divine plan. His suffering had shaped him into a person of wisdom, patience, and moral clarity. By the time his brothers approached him in need, Yousaf could see beyond their immediate wrongdoing to the broader context. Their actions were wrong, yes, but they had also been instruments in a chain of events that ultimately prepared him for leadership, insight, and influence. Philosophically, forgiveness requires the ability to perceive the larger narrative, to recognize that life's trials, even those caused by human malice, can contribute to growth and ultimate triumph. There is also a profound moral and ethical dimension to forgiveness. Yousaf could have justified anger or vengeance, yet he chose compassion. By forgiving, he elevated himself above the cycle of harm, refusing to perpetuate the pain he had suffered. This teaches a critical lesson. True power is not in punishment, but in moral authority. Those who forgive exercise a kind of influence that cannot be achieved through fear or retaliation. Forgiveness transforms relationships, restores dignity, and cultivates an environment where reconciliation and understanding are possible. Psychologically, forgiveness liberates the forgiver as much as the forgiven. Holding on to resentment is a form of self-imprisonment, an invisible chain that continues to weigh on the heart and mind. Yousaf, through his choice to forgive, demonstrates the profound freedom that comes from letting go of this burden. In forgiving, he is not excusing his brother's behavior. He is choosing to act in alignment with higher principles, to release the corrosive power of anger and replace it with wisdom, mercy, and foresight. Forgiveness, in this sense, is both an emotional and spiritual triumph. Forgiveness also connects to leadership and influence. Yousaf forgave at the moment when he held ultimate authority. This timing is instructive. Forgiveness is not merely a private moral act. It is also a strategic and transformative choice that shapes social dynamics. By forgiving, Yousaf preserved relationships, strengthened family bonds, and ensured the well-being of a broader community during a time of famine. This demonstrates that true triumph is not only personal, it is relational and communal. The act of forgiving can multiply its effects, producing harmony, collaboration, and collective growth. For us, the lessons are clear. Life will inevitably confront us with those who hurt us, betray us, or act unjustly. We may be tempted to respond in anger, to seek revenge, or to dwell endlessly on the harm done. Yet the story of Yousaf challenges us to consider a different path. The path of conscious forgiveness, a decision rooted in moral clarity, psychological freedom, and spiritual insight. Forgiveness is not a concession. It is a declaration of strength, a refusal to allow injustice to define us, and a commitment to act in accordance with higher principles. In the end, Yousaf teaches us that triumph is not measured by the power we wield over others, but by the mastery we achieve over our own hearts. By forgiving those who wronged him, he turned betrayal into reconciliation, suffering into wisdom, and pain into a demonstration of divine grace. Forgiveness is the ultimate act of resilience, the final step in transforming trial into triumph. So, as you face those who have wronged you, consider the power of forgiveness. Recognize that it is not a gift to the other person alone, but a liberation for yourself. Choose to act from a place of strength, integrity, and wisdom. In doing so, you do not merely survive injustice, you transcend it, and you take the first step toward your own triumph. The story of Yousaf does not end with forgiveness, patience, or wisdom alone. It culminates in the creation of a legacy, a life that transforms personal trials into a lasting impact that benefits others. When we speak of legacy, we often think in terms of wealth, status, or recognition. Yousaf's legacy, however, is far richer and deeper. It is a legacy of character, faith, insight, and moral leadership. His life teaches us that the true measure of triumph is not simply the resolution of one's own struggles, but the ability to turn those struggles into something that endures, something that inspires and benefits generations to come. From a psychological perspective, turning trials into legacy requires reflection, integration, and conscious action. Yousaf endured betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. Yet he did not allow these hardships to define him solely as a victim. Instead, he reflected on his experiences, learned from them, and applied those lessons in ways that shaped the course of history. He transformed suffering into wisdom, adversity into insight, and pain into moral authority. This process of integration is essential for anyone who wishes to leave a lasting impact. It is not enough to endure trials. We must process them, extract the lessons, and apply them constructively in the world around us. Philosophically, Yousaf's legacy demonstrates that true triumph is inseparable from purpose. His life shows us that hardships, no matter how severe, are meaningful when they are aligned with a higher purpose. Every betrayal, every trial, every moment of suffering contributed to his capacity to serve others, to provide guidance, and to exercise leadership with justice and compassion. In this sense, trials are not interruptions of life. They are preparatory stages. They build the depth of character and vision that are necessary to achieve a legacy that endures beyond the self. Yousaf also teaches that legacy is not created in isolation. It is relational and communal. His wisdom in managing Egypt during the famine, his strategic planning, and his ability to forgive and reconcile with his brothers created a lasting impact not just for himself, but for countless lives that depended on him. This highlights a critical lesson. Our response to trials has the potential to ripple outward, affecting families, communities, and even societies. A life that converts personal suffering into constructive action becomes a beacon for others, a source of guidance and inspiration. From a moral perspective, Yousaf's legacy is inseparable from his integrity. Every step of his journey, from resisting temptation to exercising forgiveness, from navigating adversity to leading with insight, demonstrates that enduring success is rooted in ethical behavior. One can achieve temporary gains through compromise, deception, or revenge. But a lasting legacy requires adherence to principles, even when it comes at a cost. Yousaf exemplifies that character is the foundation upon which enduring influence is built. Without it, any success is fragile, vulnerable to erosion by the very challenges that once tested us. Spiritually, the story of Yousaf reminds us that the ultimate legacy is a reflection of alignment with divine purpose. His life is a testament to the idea that God can turn trials into triumphs in ways that transcend human understanding. Every challenge he faced, every act of patience, wisdom, and forgiveness was part of a greater tapestry that contributed to a lasting and meaningful legacy. This perspective invites us to trust that our struggles, too, have significance beyond what we can immediately perceive. Our hardships are not meaningless. They are opportunities to cultivate the qualities that will define the impact we leave behind. For us today, this is a powerful lesson. Each of us faces trials, big and small. Some test our patience, others challenge our integrity, and some push us to the limits of our endurance. Yet, the story of Yousaf encourages us to view these challenges not as setbacks, but as stepping stones toward a greater purpose. Every struggle, when met with faith, patience, wisdom, and forgiveness, contributes to the legacy we leave, how we influence others, how we shape the world, and how we are remembered not merely for what we endured, but for how we responded. In the end, Yousaf shows us that triumph is more than personal success. It is the transformation of suffering into lasting benefit, the ability to turn trials into guidance for others, and the cultivation of a life that speaks beyond our own experience. Legacy is born when endurance, insight, integrity, and compassion converge. So, as you reflect on your own journey, ask yourself, how can your struggles serve a greater purpose? How can your trials shape your character, guide your actions, and leave a lasting mark on the world? Remember Yousaf as the hardships we face are not the end of the story. They are the beginning of a legacy. It is up to us to transform our trials into triumph, and in doing so, to create a life that resonates far beyond our own time.